Alright, so in this lamb today we're going to be using the epoxy resin. We're going to be using one of our AF connectors, the alignable 4 103. We're going to go with another medium airlock. And we've got the nylon and the flexi stretch on there, tied off at the tie-off ring. Again, it's just for smoothness of socket. Now we will start with our nylon stockinette. This will actually add some structure. So we're going to actually go above the connector with it. We're going to reflect it and then work it around the posts. So we'll tie her off. Bing. And then for this, you don't want a bunch of bulk in the center of that AF connector. So we're going to reflect it here. Pull it down. Just barely enough there. And for this portion, you will just poke it and cut a little hole and work our nylon around those posts, like so. Both layers. Alright, and then we'll do the same for the button here. Got 2 layers. Careful not to stab into our clay, which you can see I've got some clay in there. And now we'll go with the composite. Spray glue. Put it up on there. Just open up this braid a little bit. Just like so. Over here, just going to cut our excess so we don't have too much bulk here. The distal end. And then we're just going to work it around the posts. Cutting a little V. Just work this in the middle. Off these little frays. There we go. We got it wrapped around, and we'll do our carbon reinforcement strips here. Wrap it around our button so we're not grinding into the carbon. There's a couple different ways. We can put the second layer over and put it all in there, but to give this a nice flush edge. I'm going to put the glue plate on and then put the composite over that. So we'll get the strip here. And again, I like to dab a little grease on my screws. This is just electrical insulation compound, or M4 as we call it. Not a ton, just a little bit. Now if you're doing fabric on the outside, I would do both the composites under the glue plate and then put the glue plate on and then just reflect everything over to give this a nice smooth edge. But since we're doing composite on the outside, we'll just do the second layer of composite over everything. Now, unlike the CD111, the OneShot connector, the alignable 4, the screws don't go through the connector. So you don't have to worry about when you transfer to leave room between the connector and the lock. It can sit directly on the lock, as it has a cavity. Boom. We'll putty in the screws. Go for that. Now we just do our second layer of composite. We've got our reinforcements. Now if I were going to do any other reinforcements, if this was a heavy duty or we knew this was going to put stress in certain areas, I do all my reinforcements in between the two layers, similar to I-beam. There we go. And we don't want too much hanging over, just enough to get us there. Just put that directly over. Open up our composite. Try not to stab my putty. There we go. Now we can just grab an outside stockinette, like so. Which when I'm doing a pigmented socket with the black, I like to use black stockinette. This is just feather stretch, just like so. We're going to do the opposite of the previous socket. We're going to do dull on the inside, shiny on the out. Just wrinkle out of my bag here. There we go. A little heat on this guy. Down just a bit. Well, vacuum test, we've got good vacuum. Really good vacuum. And because we're using ER or epoxy resin, we won't have to open another vacuum. We want full draw, which should be about 22 pounds. Now the ER we use has a 2-to-1 ratio, which I've already drawn out, so we'll do 225 of the part A, which is the resin. And you can see how thick this stuff is. It just blobs out there. Very dense stuff. There we go. Do some pigment real quick. See how thick this stuff is? Very thick resin. Alright, now we'll do our hardener. We're going to do 90 to the 225. And you can see the viscosity of this is very low. Perfect. You can see mixing these. The hardener just kind of sits on top and you really have to work it in there. I will heat this. Like I said, you don't have to. You can do it non-heated and just have a longer working time. But I like to heat it up, lower the viscosity, and make it quick and easy to string. So once I have it fully mixed, and I will just heat the cup and stir. This will allow me to tell how thin it's getting. And now it's thinned out. So I can come over and my resin in there. I go too high on the reservoir. Where is like this, you get a little resin on the bag, you just a little acetone and you're clean. You can see it soaking in. Now we just want a little bit more go down in there. I don't want my reservoir to go too low so we don't get any air in there. Now I can dump the rest of my resin in. And like we did on the previous lamination, we'll cap off our reservoir here, ensuring no air gets in. And now we'll push the remainder of our resin in there. With a string just to make sure we get full saturation. So we're fully saturated. Now we're just going to work it till we get the texture we want. So at this point I'm going to stop and just heat this stuff up and thin it out. Now I can just work out any error. This one's already strung out pretty good. So, my full-on tie off here. And because this is ER, we can actually tape the distal end. I'm not going to tape it too tight, as it is a medium airlock. Just a little bit, though. And because it's ER, this resin will self-level. And when it finally hardens up, you won't see tape marks. Unlike the acrylic modified epoxy, which does leave tape marks. Now I can just pull down the remainder. Again, not stringing too tight, just to get the remainder of the resin and any air that might be trapped in there. Give it one more heating. Always use the hand just so you can tell you're not overheating it. You can tell there's a little bit back here. So I'll just give it a nice medium strain. There we go. And we just park the resin in the areas we know are out of the trim lines. So the popliteal and the knee. And then just string lightly over the distal end. And there we go. And that is lamination with our ER resin.
So typically I like to cut the top of the PVA bag but leave the rest on just as an added layer of protection. And then from here I'll do my general shaping on the shoe machine, which is a very low grit sandpaper. Get the distal end of it where the glue plate is, sand that down, and just, like I said, get the general shaping, open up the lock button. And then I'll take it over to the Troutman and I will start with a fine cone just to go over the rough trims. And then I'll use a 36 grit small cone to typically get my shaping, you know, my round edges and smoothed up a little bit. And then I'll move on to a fine cone. And after that I will use a Dacron buffing wheel. The fine cone I like to use is the Philauer one. It's got the rubber bushing inserts, which I'll include a picture of. It's just a softer one. It doesn't bounce as much when you're on the Troutman. But as far as sanding them up, and then I just continue on with the wet sanding with everything else. And that's typically it. Now both these sockets I'm sanding, one is with the epoxy and one is with modified acrylic. They both sand the same. I don't notice any real difference in the sanding of them. But yeah, that's pretty much typically how we do them. And it ends up being really good.